Welcome back. 10 minutes till noon on your Wednesday morning. As we have been reporting for weeks now, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, prepping to launch an operation, expanded operations here in Chicago. One that the Department of Homeland Security, they're calling it Operation Midway Blitz. Federal officials say that it is aimed at undocumented immigrants who have, like, for sure, criminal records. Critics, however, they're arguing this is political theater, that this is all about creating more conflict.
And more fear.
More fear in that community. So joining us now to help break down some of the dynamics that are at play right now, Nayna Gupta. She is Policy Director with the American Immigration Council, to help us kind of unpack some of the legal and political stakes behind this whole operation. Again, it's called Operation Midway Blitz. Nayna, thank you so much for being on the program. We really appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
Nayna, we've heard that, at least from federal officials, that they're doing this to get criminals off the streets that are illegal here illegally. Is that proving to be true?
No. We've heard this president and his administration over and over again use this phrase, we're going after the worst of the worst. What we know is that right now, 1 in 10 people locked up in immigration jails around the country are people with criminal convictions. Only 1 in 10. In other words, the overwhelming majority of people who are being arrested, detained, incarcerated by the Trump administration, ICE, and federal authorities are people who have absolutely no criminal record. We're seeing these agencies target longtime residents, asylum seekers who are following the rules, waiting for their cases to be called up in immigration courts. We've seen, here in Washington, D.C., where I'm located, where we've already been dealing with law enforcement actions, we've seen ICE go after Uber Eats drivers, restaurant owners, longtime residents of our city. That is in reality who is getting targeted with these raids. And in the first instance, there are not enough immigrants with serious criminal records to meet the daily arrest quotas that this administration has set for its raids. The administration is saying they want to arrest 3,000 immigrants per day. There are not even enough criminal immigrants to meet that quota. And so as a result, what we're seeing are these indiscriminate, in-community law enforcement actions that sweep in people who pose absolutely no public safety threat, and as a result have a chilling effect where thousands of others become afraid to go to school, show up to work, and participate in their communities.
Okay, you mentioned 1 out of 10 folks that are detained right now actually have some kind of documented criminal record. To your knowledge, what is happening to the other 9?
Right, so for the people who are currently in immigration detention facilities, what we know is that right now many of them are being denied access to court hearings where they're supposed to be able to make a case for release, where they're supposed to be able to say, hey, I don't pose a public safety threat. I've lived here for many years. I own my own business. I'm raising my kids. I'd like to be able to have access to more permanent status, but I don't pose a public safety threat. They are not getting access to those bond hearings. The Trump administration is increasingly depriving people of access to that. We also know that these people are languishing in absolutely deplorable conditions in immigration detention facilities around the country. Somebody arrested or picked up in Chicago could be detained all the way in Louisiana. This is a system that shuffles people around. It's a system where we're hearing reports of starvation, no access to basic medical care. We've seen more deaths this year in immigration detention facilities than last year or any other year. So what we know is that these are, on the one hand, people who pose no public safety threat, and on the other hand, are now facing extreme deprivation of their liberty, extreme consequences, and no meaningful access to due process. And I'll just add, this is a system where there is no right to an appointed lawyer. In a criminal case, if somebody is accused of breaking a crime, they have a right to an appointed lawyer. That does not exist in the U.S. immigration system. So when people are swept up or arrested and detained in these raids we're seeing in LA, Washington, D.C., now in Chicago, And if they are in fact locked up, they don't automatically get a lawyer. It's only if they're able to find one themselves that they have legal representation.
We only have a few minutes left, Nayna, but I want to ask you, do we know anything in terms of the numbers? I know a lot of agencies are not giving up this information, but is there any indication of how many people have been rounded up and taken to these facilities?
It's difficult to know exact numbers given that there are people who are being arrested and detained, some who are released, others who are put into detention facilities. The immigration agencies are no longer making access to an online locator as easy as it used to be. So to your point, it is incredibly difficult to know. But what we do know is that they again have set a daily quota arrest goal of 3,000 immigrants per day. And there have been some weeks where they are hitting that goal, others where they're not. But they are constantly making policy changes to try to meet that goal, including using law enforcement resources from other federal agencies, trying to co-opt state and local police to do the work of immigration arrests. And so the impact here is both direct in that there are an increasing number of people that are being swept up. But as I mentioned, the impact goes even more broadly because there are so many others who are not swept up but are nevertheless terrified to even leave their homes.
When we hear about these dynamics, I know on my own social media, sometimes I'll see comments cross to the effect of, okay, these people may not be violent. They didn't follow the rules on their way in, though. There's no obligation for us to follow due process now that because they didn't. How do you respond to that argument?
Look, you know, there are millions of people here in the country who are undocumented. They don't have permanent status. But one of the biggest misconceptions is that these are folks who actually don't have a way to get right with the law. They might want to, but Congress has failed to provide pathways for people to actually follow the rules. And in the meantime, undocumented immigrants are paying federal and state and local taxes. $40 billion in 2022 in federal taxes.
Nayna,
they are key.
I hate to interrupt you. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. We definitely want to have you back on the show. This is an issue that obviously will persist for quite some time.
Oh, yeah.
So we plan to have you back. Sorry that we had to cut you off, but we appreciate everything that you've had to say.
Thank you.